Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today we continue with the book of Daniel and we're covering chapter 7 today. So let's get straight into it. And from verse 1, in the first year of Belshazzar. Now before I begin, Daniel chapter 7 marks an end and a beginning. So I stated before that in chapter 6 it was the end of the part of Daniel. The first half of Daniel was mostly history, so it was the end of that. So this chapter 7 is the beginning of there's only prophecy on this side. There's some history sprinkled in, but there's only prophecy. It's also the beginning where the book does not run in a linear format. Prior, chapter 1 happened before chapter 2, happened before chapter 3, etc. With from 7 to 12, things happen all over the place. Okay? So chapter 7 may not necessarily be, things don't flow in a linear fashion. And this is chapter 7. It's the end, in that this chapter is the last chapter in Daniel that's written in Aramaic. Most of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, except for a little bit of Ezra, and from almost the beginning of chapter 2 of Daniel all the way to the end of chapter 7 of Daniel. So this book starts, and Daniel is very exciting. At least it's very exciting to me. I decided to do Daniel because I believe this is the linchpin of prophecy. And as Christian people, we are supposed to study prophecy. We are supposed, God has put it there so that we know what's coming, so that we're not caught unawares, and we're supposed to study it. And Daniel is a linchpin. For example, in this chapter, you're going to see exactly what, the broad brushstrokes of what happens from Daniel's time into our time. You're going to see God's plan. All right? The brushstrokes. Now, there are a ton of other books in the Bible that fill in this gap or fill in that. But Daniel is like a big template. Right? That's why I call it the linchpin. It's like a big template letting you know what's happening, what's coming, what the plan is, what to look out for. So let's continue. So in the first year of Belshazzar, and if you remember, Belshazzar was the descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. He was the son of Nabonidus, and he was in Babylon and lost its head when Cyrus defeated Babylon and appointed Darius as the king. So he had reigned 10 years or thereabouts. So this would be the first year of his reign. He wasn't technically the king. He was the king regent, but he would have been called the king in Babylon. He wasn't technically the king because his father Nabonidus was the king. But Nabonidus had gone on pilgrimage or holiday or campaign or whatever. All right? So in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and the four great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. So Daniel is in bed, and he's having a vision. Somewhere between a dream and a vision, I don't know if he was sleeping and he woke up and this continued, however it went. But in the dream, in the vision, I should say, he saw four winds from out of heaven stirring up the great sea. What's the great sea? The great sea could be one of two things. In Daniel's time, they called the Mediterranean the Great Sea. And prophetically, the Great Sea is the sea of humanity. Based on what we are going to see next, they're not talking about the Mediterranean. They're talking about the sea of humanity. They're talking about the sea of all peoples, the nations around Israel, the nations of the world, etc. So he saw a great sea and 4 great beasts coming out from the sea, each one different to one another. Now we have seen this before in chapter 2, but we're seeing it again in a different form. We saw this before in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but we're seeing it again. Let's continue. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. So, the first, okay, sorry about that. All right, so the first vision, the first beast he saw, it was a lion with wings. All right, now it's no stretch to figure out or to understand that this is Babylon that he's seeing here. All right, historically, the symbol of Babylon was a lion with wings. If you go to various museums around the world and you see any artifacts from the time of Babylon, you're going to see that the symbol of Babylon that they carried, that they had, was a lion with wings. All right, and while he was watching, the wings were plucked off. All right, so this lion with eagle's wings, it was plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground to stand up on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Maybe it meant coming down to the end of Babylon or the death of Nebuchadnezzar. What I personally believe is between Nebuchadnezzar's death and the end of Babylon was just about 30-40 years. And coming down to the end of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar was full of pride. And God humbled him. And there are many who believe Nebuchadnezzar probably died believing in Yahweh. So possibly the pride of Babylon, because it states in this book that these 4 beasts are kings or kingdoms. The word used is kind of interchangeable. All right, so this is more than likely Babylon. But the king of Babylon, the ruler of Babylon, in those days it didn't have democracy, it didn't have rule by committee. What the king wanted, the king got. The king's diplomatic stance was the nation's diplomatic stance. So coming down to the end of Babylon, right, Nebuchadnezzar was a bit of a changed man, or a bit of a changed person. He did not seem to be as proud and as haughty as he was. Maybe that's what's referring to that. All right, but the first beast that Daniel sees is symbolic of Babylon. Let's continue. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. Now we know that this bear is the beast or the kingdom that replaced Babylon. So that's the Medo-Persians or the Persians. A bear is a strong beast, and the Persians were massively strong. To this day, there are people who don't trust certain ancient writings for the simple reason, particularly Persian writings, for the simple reason because of the size of the armies that the Persians claim to have. When the Persians invaded Greece, all right, the whole 300, if you know the 300, the Battle of the 300 at Thermopylae, it was claimed that they invaded Greece with 1 million. Modern day scholars think, hey, that's not possible. How are you? 1 million people at that time, not that you couldn't find 1 million people, but the logistics of it would have been impossible. But what if it was true? Historically, we know that when the Persians go to war with someone, particularly in the days of Cyrus. They, a lot of times, would not even fight a battle. They would show up with an army, and the enemy would say, okay, we surrender, because the army that the Persians would come with would be so vast. So, possibly, because the bear has the only thing higher in the food chain than the bear is men, and that's because we have guns. All right, so massive, powerful animal, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, and it was told. Who was it told by? Who put it in authority? And we'll see that what Daniel is trying to show is, regardless of the machinations of men, God allows you to come into authority, and he removes you. So don't get the big head for things, right? But what could this 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth mean? So, the idea that 3 ribs is in its mouth, it's meant to convey the fact that it devoured 3 animals, and it killed them, and it ate them to pieces, and it's crushing their bones. The Persian Empire became the Persian Empire, and became the massive great empire it was, because of the defeat of 3 nations: Lydia, Egypt, and Babylon. So I believe those ribs are representative or symbolic of its defeat, crushing defeat of Lydia, Egypt, and Babylon, 3 massive empires of the day that were defeated by the Persians. Let's continue. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Again, we see these people believe that, hey, I took this or I took that. No, you are allowed to have dominion, because regardless of the foolishness men does, Yahweh is over all. And we're going to see that Yahweh is over all. But let's look at this beast. So the beast looks like a leopard. It has wings of a bird, and has 4 heads. Now we know that this beast replaced, this is the beast that replaced the bear, that replaced the lion. So we know this is Persia. We know this is Greece, because Greece defeated the Persian Empire, and the Persian Empire had defeated the Babylonian Empire. But wings. Now we are going to see a symbolic animal of Greece again in the book of Daniel. The wings symbolizes how fast this animal is. Similarly, because it's a leopard is a very fast creature. So aside from it being a very fast creature, it also has wings like a bird, so it's swift, it moves. In the next chapter, we're going to see another animal that symbolizes Greece, and it moves quickly. But why the 4 heads? The reason for the 4 heads, historically, Greece came out of nowhere. They were a little backwater, not many people. And they were led by a man who wasn't even supposed to lead. The son of Philip of Macedon, Alexander. Alexander was about 19 or 20 when he started his conquest. And by 29, it's written, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, because everything concerning Alexander was written 300 years after his death. But it's written that Alexander cried at the age of 29 because he said there's no more worlds to conquer. He'd beaten everyone. Alexander went and beat everyone. He was always outnumbered, particularly when he was facing the Persians, and he beat them every single time. Vastly outnumbered. And these were battles not fought with planes and tanks. These were battles fought with arrows and spears and swords. And he, who would be heavily outnumbered, would beat them every time. Yet at the age of 31, young man, healthy man, strong man, Alexander just picked up and died with no heir. There was no heir as the next king of Greece. And on his deathbed, it's written as well. Whether it's true, we will not know until someone is able to ask Alexander directly. So, on his deathbed, when asked who will get the kingdom, Alexander said, whoever is the strongest. Now, there's another passage where Alexander had 5 ruling generals. Now, Alexander comes after this. Alexander is after the time of Daniel. But you're seeing 4 heads. Okay? You saw that in Nebuchadnezzar's dream as well. Okay? That this great kingdom will split in 4. Alexander had 5 chief generals and one just abruptly died. So he was left with 4. So when Alexander died, he said, okay, the kingdom goes to whoever is the strongest. So his 4 strongest generals, there were 5, but one unexpectedly died. The 4 strongest generals split up the lands that he conquered between themselves. So Cassander took Greece. Asia Minor, which is modern day Turkey and Armenia and stuff, was taken by Lysimachus. I hope I didn't butcher that name. Seleucus took the area around Babylon and that area, the area north of Israel. So we're looking at where modern day Iran is. So he took like where Lydia was, Persia, Babylon, etc. And Ptolemy took Egypt and those lands to the south, Egypt and Sudan, etc. And there was a little sliver of land that they wanted to be a buffer state, but they'd constantly fight for it. Sometimes the descendants of Seleucus got it. Sometimes the descendants of Ptolemy got it. So that's what happened to Greece. Greece broke up, and it was still Greece, but it was 4 nations. So you had Cassander in Greece, Lysimachus in Asia Minor, Seleucus in, let's call that Syria and Persia, etc. And Ptolemy in Iraq, and sorry, not in Iraq, in Egypt. All right. So Greece broke up into 4 nations, but it was still all Greece. All right. Some of those nations were nice, some were not. For example, in Egypt, Ptolemy is the person who basically paid for the Septuagint, where the Hebrew Bible was, the Old Testament was translated into Greek. He paid for that. Whereas in the north, right, one of the Ptolemies did that, but in the north, a descendant of Seleucus, a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes, who actually is the template or the example of the Antichrist. Right? He was the first person who mounted an abomination that made desolate, an abomination of desolation in the temple. He decided to try to destroy everything related to Judaism and everything related to Yahweh. Right? But let's continue. So the third beast would have been Greece. All right, let's go forward. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little horn, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things, or a mouth speaking blasphemous things. So this is the fourth beast, the final beast. And we know this beast to be Rome. This beast was different, and historically we saw that Rome was different. And how was Rome different? Every one of those succeeding nations, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, to some extent, not necessarily fully, but to some extent, respected the history, the culture, and the practices of the conquered people. All right? So, which is why people from Persia, when the Christ child was born, came and visited him, the Magi, the wise men, because they knew about that from the time of Daniel. And that came down all those 500-600 years later. All right? That's why Ptolemy, all right, the Ptolemies had the Septuagint, they had the Hebrew Bible translated into Greek, creating the Septuagint. Even the Seleucids at times were relatively patient with the Jews and allowed them to practice. The Romans, however, were a completely different kettle of fish. The Romans took pride in destroying your culture. They took pride in destroying anything, destroying your religions, destroying everything. They would break it to pieces. They would, in fact, the reason why there are some people who think that there was at some point a country named Palestine, it's because in 133 AD, to annoy the Jews, who the Romans were murdering and deporting and sending into exile around their empire, to annoy the Jews, they renamed the land of Israel into Palestina. Palestina is the Latin of Philistine. So the Romans, to annoy the Jews, to disrespect the Jews, decided to rename the land after the most hated ancient enemy of Israel. That's what Rome was like. But this Rome, it's a beast, but it consists of 10 horns or 10 leaders. And one of the horns that grows up later is small, is insignificant. Yet it's apparently crafty because it got rid of 3. But we're going to see that more and more in the book of Daniel. Okay? So let's continue. So this beast is Rome. Alright? This beast is Rome. So let's continue. So, just as a recap, in Daniel 2, we saw Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. This chapter is pretty much the same thing. It's the same thing. God goes over things because it's important. And this in the Bible, in biblical sources and in extra biblical sources that I won't get into, we see this same thing over and over. So that tells us it's important. Why? Because this is the future, this is the plan, this is the broad strokes of what's going to happen. So just a recap, in Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a statue. It had a head of gold, etc. So in the statue, it had a head of gold that represented Babylon. Chest of silver, chest and arms of silver that represented Persia. Stomach and thighs of brass that represented Greece. Legs of iron that represented Rome. And feet of iron mixed with clay. And that represented Rome 2.0 or future Rome. In this chapter, chapter 7, Daniel has a vision from God, and he sees 4 beasts. A winged lion that represents Babylon, a great mighty bear that represents Persia, a 4-headed winged leopard that represents Greece, and a beast without description that represents Rome. You'll notice it doesn't show you 2 rooms. a Rome and a future Rome. It's just one beast, which means that beast has been there for a while. And I believe that beast has been there for a while because up until 1948, you see, people think that Rome ended when the Western Roman Empire ended in, I think it's 478 AD. That wasn't the case. Rome had split into two because it had grown too big to be administered by one king. So it had split into two. So there was a Western Roman Empire, and the headquarters of that, the capital of that, was in Rome. And there was an Eastern Roman Empire, and the headquarters of that, or the capital of that, was in Constantinople or Byzantine or modern day Istanbul, whichever you wish to call it. So in 476, Rome in the West went away. It wasn't really defeated by anyone, it just fizzled out. Yes, there were wars with the Goths and with the Visigoths and etc. But and as well as the Mongols and whatever, but not the Mongols, no, the Huns. But it didn't really go away. It just fizzled out. It just broke up. All right, like how the Soviet Union just broke up. But even after that happened, there was still a Roman Empire, because the empire in the East lasted 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years, it was defeated by the Muslims, by the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, now remember, to qualify to be one of these metal kingdoms or to be one of these beasts is not that you are ruling the world. It's that you are ruling the land of Israel. The word world, that's usually the word translated world in the Old Testament, is Eretz. Alright? So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The word earth is Eretz. Now, the weird thing with Eretz, in fact, the weird thing with Hebrew is a very complex language. I'm finishing another master's degree in cybersecurity, and Hebrew is way, way, way more complex than that. Hebrew is a really, really, really weird language. Some words change based on the context that they're used. And the word Eretz, it can mean the planet, it can mean the soil, it can mean the country, it can mean a whole bunch of things. It can even mean the underworld. Right? So it depends on the context. So these kingdoms that are ruling the world, it's those kingdoms that have rulership over the land of Israel. Now, these kingdoms are powerful and they are regional superpowers in the time, and they may even be global superpowers in the future. But to qualify, so the reason you're not going to see the Aztecs or the Toltecs here is because they never ruled Israel. Okay? That being aside, so the Romans in the East, in the Eastern Empire, were taken over by the Ottomans. The Ottomans came out of where the Eastern Empire was. They claimed to be the Ottoman Empire, okay, and they were soundly defeated in World War I and kind of ceased to exist. Turkey is still there. There's no Ottoman Empire anymore, but Turkey is still there, although Erdogan seems to want to recreate the Ottoman Empire. But what we've seen over the years is while there hasn't been a Rome, there has been a country from out of the Roman Empire that has always ruled the land. So, the Eastern Roman Empire had control over Israel until, the 15th century, when the Ottomans defeated the Eastern Roman Empire. And the Ottoman, well, during the Crusader Wars, Israel passed back and forth between European kingdoms and the Ottomans until the Ottomans took it over completely. And they had that until 1917 or thereabouts. And from 1917, it's been under the control of Britain until 1948. So, possibly, we're going to see Rome 2.0 step up fully. Who can it be? I'm not going to guess at that. Right? I'm not a date setter, and I'm not someone who makes guesses. But some country or some group of country outside of what used to be Rome is going to rise up and be a major force in these end times, because we are in the end times. The end times started in 1948 when Israel, after 2,000 years, became a nation. The other thing I found noteworthy, Nebuchadnezzar saw these empires as nice, beautiful, shiny, precious metals. God sees these empires as wild, ravenous beasts, dangerous things. Not precious things, but dangerous things. Let's continue. So from verse 9, as I looked, thrones were placed. Now if you look in the King James, it may say thrones were thrown down. Yeah, that was wrong. That's a bad translation. So thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days, take note of this, the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. The throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Do you know what we're seeing here? What we're seeing here is a divine council meeting. At some point, I'll probably go through. I probably have touched on it in the past videos, particularly if I touched on Psalm 82. But what we're seeing here is a divine council meeting. And the Ancient of Days that we're seeing there is the person that we like to refer to as God the Father. Now, I want to stop on this for a little second, because, well, there are many things that irritate me, but there are two things in particular these days that irritate me. One of them is Christians who insist to talk about the church has replaced Israel. Now, I can understand Christians talking that foolishness 100 years ago, right? Israel ceased to exist as a nation since AD 133. So I could understand you stating that the church has replaced Israel, and the church is the new Israel. It's a spiritual Israel, and all God's blessings are for the church, and God has moved on. I could understand you talking that foolishness then. But then in 1948, and what happened thereafter? Two Israeli tanks will face 50 enemy tanks and win. A one-day-old nation attacked by all its neighbors, woefully outnumbered and outgunned, and win. Right? Even what we're seeing currently, and I don't want to get into much into the politics, but even what we're seeing currently, you have to be special and touched to not see that God has his hand in this. Even if you don't know all the books and the prophecies, and there are lots of books of prophecies, I realize that I'm going to try to get into all of them. I'm going to try to get into Amos and Zechariah and Obadiah, etc., etc. I thought I was done making videos, but I'm not. I'm going to do this until God is ready for me to stop. So you have to be crazy to believe in replacement theology now. So replacement theology, where the church has replaced Israel, that irks me. The other thing that irks me is the whole Black Hebrew Israelite movement. Not because black people saying they're Jews, because Jews don't have a color. There are Jews that look Caucasian. There are Jews that are Chinese. There are Jews that are Indian. There are Jews that are African. There are Jews that look all how. I don't mind that. That's Jews were scattered throughout the earth. They look different. They went various places and married people from those places, so they look different. What I have a problem with is a bunch of people stating those people over there in Israel, they are not really Jews. Well, if they are not really Jews over there in Israel, how in heaven's name are all these prophecies about Israel coming back in the end times and what happens to them? How come these prophecies are being fulfilled about them? The Bible says, and I don't know if I've ever touched on it, but I probably would. I think I have. The Bible says that the first people to bring back the Jews will be the British. The British started bringing back the Jews to the land in 1917. The Balfour Declaration. 1919, somewhere there around. The Balfour Declaration. So those two things irritate me. Because one is they're stating that God is a liar. God cannot keep his promises. So all the promises he made for Israel, they're null and void because Israel did something and God can't keep his promises, so he's going to do it with some other people. So God is a liar. All the things he told Israel, he lied to them. That's what replacement theology, that's basically what you are stating. And the second thing is, you are taking people's mind off of and eyes off where they should be. And one of the things that Hebrew Israelites like to use is this thing, the hair is pure wool. So, that means that Jesus looks like somebody from Africa. He has kinky African hair. I have kinky African hair. I'm of African descent. That doesn't matter. If we spend half the time trying to figure out what Yahweh wants, as opposed to what Jesus and Yahweh really look like, what race are they, then we will go somewhere. But we've forgotten, a lot of us have forgotten. The Bible says that in the end days, nation will rise up against nation. The word used for nation is ethnos. Ethnicity or race shall rise up and be against other races. We're not supposed to do that. We're followers of Christ. There's no race with us. We're followers of Christ. We need to stop that foolishness. So, the first part from chapter 9. Thrones were placed. And the Ancient of Days, this Ancient of Days is Yahweh. And he has called a divine council meeting. Yahweh and the small g gods. Right? The interesting thing is, this description of the Ancient of Days is used in Revelation for Jesus. And we're going to see something else further down in this chapter. But this description as the Ancient of Days is used further in Revelation and other places for Jesus. And what does it mean? His clothes was white as snow. It was lily white. And his hair was like pure wool. What's pure wool? Pure wool is wool without stains. And wool that's not dirty. And wool without blemishes. Pure wool is not about the texture, it's about the color. This is speaking about this person who is called the Ancient of Days is completely righteous. And he is on a chair that is fire. The fire speaks about judgment. The fire speaks about purity. The fire speaks about power. And he has millions attending to him. And he sat at the head of the divine council, as the leader of the divine council. Alright, so let's continue from verse 11. I looked then because of the sound of the great words, or the blasphemous words that the little horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed. So that final beast, it was killed, and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So, of all the beasts, only this beast was killed. Only this. So we know this beast is about, it symbolizes kingdoms. So this kingdom was destroyed. But the other kingdoms, their lives were prolonged, or they were allowed to live for a season and a time. The word for season and time is Zedan and Edan. Zedan means, Zedan or Zimam? Zimam means like a set time, like an appointed time. And Edan means a period of time, usually in practice, about a year, most places in the Bible. What does season and time means? I don't know. It could also be translated for a set time of about a year. But what does it mean? I don't know. What I take from this, though, is there are nations. We talk about end times. But when Jesus comes and sets up his kingdom, there are some nations that are going to still exist. Even after Jesus sets up his nations, his kingdom. They're going to exist for a while until they willingly give their dominion over to Christ. You have to understand, Jesus, he is the King of Kings, he's the Lord of Lords, he's a mighty conqueror, but he's not a conqueror of men. If we read Isaiah, we read Psalm 82, we see who God has a quarrel with. And God's quarrel are with rebellious gods who are working against him. That's who Christ comes to conquer. God doesn't take you over. God is a perfect. Everything done towards humans is based on mercy and love, not wickedness, not vengeance. There's justice, yes, but it's mercy and it's love. It's mercy and it's love. I realized that even the sentence passed on Adam was about mercy and love. How can a merciful God send people to hell? God don't send people to hell. You send yourself to hell. You decide. You have two options. They are two completely bipolar, binary decisions. You either with God or you with the others. If you are with the others, you cannot be with God. End of story. So if you've chosen that you're with the others, there are two options in the end. With God, what Christian people like to call heaven, or without God, what the Bible refers to as hell. And even that is mercy, because in 2021, that may be a bit controversial. In 2021, I did a commentary on the book of Revelation, and I asked a question. And I've never heard anyone ask a question again until 2 weeks ago. I was watching an old video by Michael Heiser, and he was asking the same question. And that question is simple. If death and hell, and the word used for hell is Hades, it's not Gehenna. The word uses Hades, the place of death, or the place where dead things are. If death and the place where dead things are thrown into the lake of fire and destroyed, does that mean annihilation for those people thrown in there? I don't know. It's a possibility, but it very much goes with God's nature. And you see God's nature, the more you study this word, the more you take off your blinders and get down and study the word of God. All right? You see God, everything that God does concerning humans is about love and mercy. But let's continue. So the last thing we saw here is that the beast is killed. That nation of Rome is destroyed. But the other nations are prolonged for a season at a time. Does that mean a period about a year? What does that mean sometime in the future? We will find out. We'll know. When I get to know Hebrew more, I guess I'll have another theory about that. So let's continue. And from verse 13, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. Jesus loves to call himself the Son of Man. This is why I stated that the Ancient of Days was not Jesus. There came one like a Son of Man. This was what Jesus chose to call himself. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So this is Christ. Christ came to the person in this part of the passage that is called the Ancient of Days, called the Father. All right? And to Christ is given dominion, glory, and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. And this kingdom, you see all these nations that we saw before? They had times. Right? In verse 2, I gave you the times when all these kingdoms lasted. But they had a beginning and they had to have an end. The nation, the kingdom that Christ will set up will be without end. Without end. It will be everlasting. Everlasting. No end. Let's continue. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious. And in the Aramaic, it's translated me, but it's kind of odd how what he used in the Aramaic. In the Aramaic, it will actually, a better translation will be my spirit within my sheath or my scabbard. So Daniel is seeing his body as just a dwelling, like as how a scabbard is the dwelling for the sword. He is seeing that the body is just the dwelling for who he is. My spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all of this. He told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings or kingdoms who shall arise out of the earth. They arose out of the great sea, the sea of humanity, who shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High, and the saints are not people who died and somebody said they are saints. The word saints there is kadis. It's anybody. Well, kadis is Aramaic, right? The Hebrew would be kadosh, right? And it's anyone who has sanctified and set themselves up and believes in Yahweh. That's what a saint is. So the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever. Your future is the same thing God made Adam for, to have dominion over this creation, over the earth, over this physical creation that God made. And in the end, you're not going to be a disembodied spirit. Excuse me. You're not going to be a disembodied spirit floating on the air in a cloud somewhere. You're going to be a glorified human, making the physical creation that God made perfect forever and ever and ever. Let's continue. And from verse 19, then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast. Daniel wasn't bothered about the first 3. He understood those. The 4th beast, however, had him anxious. It had him concerned. It had him worried. What is this? Which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns were on its head, and the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. So this little horn, this tiny horn, destroyed or cast away 3 of the other horns. That horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great or blasphemous things, and that seemed greater than its companions, As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them. Now that's a little troubling. And it's a little troubling because there are some churches who tell Christian people that your lives are going to be hunky-dory. Everything's going to be great forever. Everything's going to be good. Everything's going to be fine. You're not going to have a problem. In fact, if you have a problem, you're in sin. You're doing something wrong. There are some people who are believers of God at some point and who are going to have a hell of a terrible time on this earth. But doesn't that create a contradiction? Because Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. Well, they won't. Because one, there's a difference between a battle and a war. Alright? You could win a battle and lose a war, which Germany found out in World War II. Which Germany found out in World War I. You could win battles and lose wars. That's number one. And two, there's a point in time where if you believe in the rapture, you know that the church is going to be replaced. Because the saints that are here are going to leave. And after the saints that are here leave, other people are going to repent. And they are going to become the new saints. Maybe those people catch a hell of a time. I don't know. But as a Christian, you have to understand that you have an enemy. Okay? Let's continue. In fact, let me rewind and start back from verse 21. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until, verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Two things here. I'll start with the smaller one. The kingdom is given to Christ, but Christ basically shares his dominion with, you see, there are two systems in the world. There's a system where you hoard and you don't share, you keep it to yourself, and there's a system where you have and you share. God's system is the second. So Christ receives dominion and he shares it with his saints. He shares it with his people. All how many ever millions of them there are, or billions of them there are, he shares it. The second thing, all right, at no point in the Bible does God the Father take on a body and come. We know that the future ends when Jesus returns, or this age ends when Jesus returns. The age doesn't end when God the Father comes to earth. The age ends when Jesus comes to earth. You'll notice in verse 22 it says, until the Ancient of Days came. So the horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came. If you are looking and paying attention, you'll realize earlier on the term Ancient of Days was used for the Father. Now the term Ancient of Days is being used for Jesus. So anybody who wants to say, well, there are two types of people here. Jehovah's Witnesses or Muslims may say, hey, they believe in three gods. Well, no, we believe in one, in three persons. But that one consists of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But they are one Yahweh. So you'll notice the term Ancient of Days was used for the Father earlier before. Now it's used for the Son. Because it's the Son who is going to come and stop the beast from destroying the saints of that time. Alright? In fact, I just have more and more. When I started this channel, I only intended to do a set amount of things. And I finished those things last Christmas with the Return of the King series. But I now have more. And just doing this, I have more. But in Isaiah it says that the final battle right? The nations will attack Israel, and Israel will finally lose a battle. And they're going to suffer. And they're going to run to a place called Bosra, modern day Petra. And when these armies are gathering around to wipe out the remnant, Jesus comes and stops it. He comes and wipes out that army. It doesn't say God the Father comes and stops it, but another term that could be used is Yahweh comes and stops it. There's one Yahweh, but three persons. So it's just interesting in there. The Jews will say, well, we only believe in one God. So, okay, there was an Ancient of Days, and a Son of Man came to the Ancient of Days. Now in verse 22, it seems to state that the Son of Man is the Ancient of Days also. Okay? Alright, but time is going. I don't want this to be too long, so let's continue. But that's really interesting. The Ancient of Days before was God the Father. Now the Ancient of Days is the person who comes to earth, and we know that's Christ. Alright, but let's continue. And from verse 23, thus he said, as for the fourth beast, it shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms. And we know how Rome is different. They're just brutal for spite. They're just brutal for the sake of brutality. They respect nothing. They care about nothing. And it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the other one, and shall put down 3 kings. So the little horn that pops up and knocks out 3 horns, this little king who isn't very important is gonna come, and we know it's speaking about the man of perdition here, who we like to call the Antichrist. He's gonna come. He's going to essentially destroy 3 kings. We're going to see this over in the book of Daniel. And there are many other books in the Bible, and hopefully we'll get to all of them. And he's going to get rid of 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High. He shall speak blasphemous things. He'll call himself a God. He'll say, don't have any God. He'll say, I'm the new God, or I'm the God. All right? He might say, hey, I'm descended from aliens. They never had a God. The aliens created man. And look, the aliens here, they're here to help me. Alright, and at some future video, at some time, probably when I get into Revelation or something, I'll say why I made that statement. I didn't intend to make it, it just flew. Alright, he shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. And they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Now, time, that term time, remember I spoke earlier about Edan and Zenan and Zemam? Well, this says Edan. Time is 1 year. Times, in English, there's singular and plural. In Hebrew and Aramaic, there's singular, there's plural, and there's a third thing. It's called a dual. So it's 2. So there's singular, plural, and 2. So time, 2 times, and half a time. 3.5 years. This should sound familiar from Revelation. Right? So they shall be given into his hand. Who is they? The saints that are around then will be given into this hand, the hand of this wicked person, for 3.5 years. Alright, he shall wear out the saints of God. He shall defeat them. He shall persecute them. He shall kill them. Know if you're standing for God, or if you're standing because you like the lifestyle, or you want an alternative lifestyle, or whatever. We don't have much time left. Alright? He shall wear out whoever is on the earth stating that they believe in God. And he shall persecute them and kill them for 3.5 years. Let's continue. And from verse 26, but the court, which court? The divine council. God's divine council. The court shall sit it. By the way, the future of man are to be members of this divine council. Where did I get that from? There's a large Bible, and I think at this stage I'm going to try to do all of it. I don't know how long it'll take, but I'll try to do all of it. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. By the way, this little horn, when we get into Revelation, we'll see that there's something special for this little horn. This little horn is thrown into the lake of fire when Christ returns. He's probably one of the first things thrown into the lake of fire when Christ returns. And Christ has a kingdom that lasts 1,000 years at that stage before there's a renewal. And that particular individual is still in the lake of fire at the end of that period. All right, let's continue. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven. Notice that I stated that earth is everything that isn't heaven. The purpose of man is to have dominion over all the physical things that God created. This is where I get some of that from. In Hebrew, in the Bible, you always see a duality. So there is the heaven and the earth, or the non-physical and the physical. So the kingdoms and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven, meaning everything that isn't heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. That's the future of man. The kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. So what you got to learn? Learn, my friend, because you're going to have great responsibilities in the future if you don't have them yet. All this is training for the great responsibilities that you won't retire from. You're not going to retire from it because you're not going to get old. But you'll have great responsibilities. And great responsibilities isn't lording over people and treating people terribly. Great responsibilities is doing things well. Right? So, let me repeat this. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Your future is to rule, to continue what Adam was supposed to do before he got sidetracked. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, my color changed, but I kept this matter at heart. So this is the beginning of Daniel in prophecy, of the prophetic part of the Bible. All right, I'll try to do them a bit faster. All right, but they're going to be coming, and I'm going to keep them coming. So I hope you enjoyed Daniel 7 as much as I enjoyed. And I'll see you soon. Thank you, and God bless.